They said the Iron Throne had ruled Westeros for 300 years, but in the end, it didn't fall to a sword or a rebellion. It fell to fire, not from dragons soaring in triumph, but from fury, from a mistake no one could ever undo. It was Daenerys who did it. After taking King's Landing, instead of waiting for counsel, instead of holding court or claiming power with grace, she walked into the throne room, looked at the melted remnants of war, and made a choice no queen had ever made. She ordered Drogon to destroy the Iron Throne. Right then, right there, the dragon obeyed. Flames consumed the twisted iron, the swords of 1,000 defeated enemies, crumbling into a glowing river of molten ruin. The throne was no more, but so was the one thing that kept the realm from falling apart, the illusion of unity. What Daenerys didn't know, what she couldn't see through the smoke and ashes, was that Westeros was not ready for a world without a throne. The moment it melted, every lord, every house, every whispering vulture waiting in the shadows began to circle. Jon Snow stood there when it happened, his face unreadable, torn between loyalty and horror. He had begged her to slow down, to talk to Tyrion, to listen to the voices that had guided her this far, but Dany was beyond listening. The deaths, the fire, the screams from the streets hadn't haunted her. They had fueled her. "I'm not here to rule the ashes," she had once said, and yet there she stood, queen of nothing but them. By the end of that day, Tyrion had thrown away his hand of the queen pin and walked into chains. Jon had disappeared into silence. Arya had already left the city, refusing to kneel to any crownless conqueror. And Sansa, well, Sansa had started writing letters. The North had already declared independence under her rule, but the destruction of the throne changed everything. The lords of the Reach, the Stormlands, and even Dorne started speaking of sovereignty. With no throne to bind them, what remained of the realm was just stitched threads on a torn flag. Whispers turned into meetings, meetings turned into allegiances, and one by one the houses chose sides, not for the realm, not for the people, but for power. The first betrayal came from the Vale. Lord Royce, once an ally to Sansa and loyal to the Stark name, announced that the Vale would not bend the knee to a queen who ruled with dragonfire. He pledged neutrality, but behind closed doors, he struck deals with the Lannister loyalists hiding in the west. Gold flowed from Casterly Rock once again, and mercenaries started pouring into the Vale's mountains. Daenerys, still claiming to be queen, sent ravens demanding loyalty. Most went unanswered. She gave them a week. Then she sent Drogon to Storm's End. What followed was not war, it was slaughter. The Baratheon banners burned, their people crying out as the shadow of wings consumed them. Gendry, the last known Baratheon, was forced to flee into exile. The people cursed Daenerys' name. No longer the breaker of chains, she had become the bringer of fire, and in the north, Sansa read the reports with a cold, shaking fury. She gathered her bannermen. The last war was over, yes, but the next had already begun. One without kings, one without laws, one where every person left alive would fight to claim their own version of power, because the Iron Throne was gone. And with it, so was peace. The time word of Storm's End's destruction reached the north. Winter had already covered Winterfell in white. Sansa stood in the great hall, the chill in the air, nothing compared to the one settling in her chest. The lords of the north surrounded her, some with fear in their eyes, others with fire. They had seen what Daenerys had done, not just to kings, Landing, but now to Storm's End. "She's gone mad," Lord Glover muttered, pacing behind the long table. "Burning cities, sending dragons to tear down keeps. There's no Iron Throne left, and still she demands to be queen." "She's no queen," Sansa said, her voice cold and sharp. "She's a tyrant, and tyrants fall." The North would never bend again. Not now, not ever. They had seen too much. lost too much, and Sansa had no intention of letting a queen, who ruled through fire, turn her homeland into ash. Still, she knew what they were up against: a dragon, an army, and a woman who believed her every action was justice, even when it bled kingdoms dry. Bran, the boy who now sat in silence and mystery, offered no advice. His eyes, cloudy and far-seeing, gave Sansa no comfort. Jon was silent too, unreachable in the south. Rumors said he had vanished into the ruins of King's Landing, neither supporting Dany nor rebelling against her. It made Sansa question where his heart truly lay. Meanwhile, in the Westerlands, Sir Bronn, now Lord of Highgarden and Master of Coin, was playing his own game. Without a throne to serve, he began hoarding gold, hiring assassins and buying loyalty like bread at market. His alliance with Royce in the Vale had already shifted the balance. They weren't declaring war yet, but they were preparing for one. The Riverlands were the first to fracture. House Tully tried to remain neutral, but chaos doesn't tolerate neutrality. Bandits and former sellswords began claiming parts of the Trident. One called himself King of the Forks and demanded tribute. Another burned Lord Blackwood's lands, claiming he fought in Daenerys' name. It wasn't war. It was collapse, and then came Arya. She arrived at Winterfell in the middle of the night, slipping through the gates like a shadow. No banners, no guards, just silence and snow. Sansa hugged her sister tightly, but even then she could feel something different in Arya, something harder. "She'll kill again," Arya said simply, referring to Daenerys. "You can see it in her eyes. She thinks she's cleaning the world, but all she's doing is making it bleed." Sansa nodded, her fingers clutching the carved edge of the war table. "We'll have to strike first." Arya didn't smile. She just said, "Then let me go." "No," Sansa said, "not yet. We have to be smart. The dragon makes her powerful, but not invincible." And in the east, across the narrow sea, word was spreading. The Mother of Dragons had destroyed the Iron Throne. Westeros had no ruler. The realm was bleeding. The Golden Company, what was left of them, began regrouping in Essos, not out of loyalty, but hunger. Gold, revenge, and the chaos of a kingdom without order was a sweet temptation. If Daenerys couldn't hold it, maybe someone else could. And at the heart of it all, Daenerys sat in what remained of the Red Keep, staring into ash-covered rubble. Her followers still believed in her. Grey Worm stood at her side, silent and loyal. But the rest of the realm was turning against her. She couldn't see it, or maybe she didn't care. She had broken the wheel, but what no one told her was, broken wheels tend to crush whatever is left beneath them. The night the North declared war, no raven was sent. Sansa knew better. Words could be intercepted. Letters could be twisted, so instead she moved in silence. The bannermen of the North began gathering under the cover of snowstorms. Quietly, deliberately, wolves prepared for war. Arya left first. Disguised as a merchant boy, she slipped through the neck, past the twins, heading toward the capital not for battle, but for something quieter, something final. She didn't speak of her plan, not even to Sansa, but her list was not forgotten. And now Daenerys was at the top. Back in King's Landing, Jon Snow stood among ashes that used to be streets. The Red Keep had been partially rebuilt, crude scaffolding now propping up charred stone. He hadn't seen Daenerys in days, not since. She ordered Drogon to burn Storm's End. He couldn't forget Gendry's face, soot-covered, bloody, betrayed. Jon had always believed in duty. It was what kept him breathing when others gave up, but now he couldn't find the line between duty and guilt. The throne was gone. The war was supposed to be over. Yet the killings hadn't stopped. He stood in the ruins of the Great Sept, staring at shattered pillars and melted stone. Somewhere nearby, small folk scavenged for food and shelter. Children coughed in alleys, and soldiers patrolled the streets, not to protect, but to enforce. Daenerys had taken the city, but she had lost its soul. Tyrion was held in a chamber deep in the keep. Jon visited him under the cover of dusk. The dwarf had grown thin, haunted, but his voice still carried that spark. "She's not what you thought," Tyrion said through the bars. "Not what I thought either. She's a conqueror who ran out of things to conquer." Jon didn't answer. "You've seen what she's done, and you still stand beside her." "I don't know where I stand," Jon confessed, voice low. "That's the problem. If you don't choose, she will choose for you, and when she does, people burn." Outside the city walls, another fire was starting. Sansa had sent a message, not to the Vale, not to Dawn, but to Iron Islands. Yara Greyjoy received the Raven aboard her ship near Pike. She read it once, then again, and said nothing for a long while. Her men asked what the letter meant. She told them only this: "The Dragon Queen has made enemies. Time to see if we can be more than just survivors." Back in King's Landing, Daenerys stood at the high balcony overlooking the remnants of her conquest. Grey Worm stood to her left. "Unwavering, do you see them?" she asked. Below, a line of prisoners knelt, men and women who had defied her rule. Some were lords who whispered rebellion. Some were nothing more than farmers who had refused to pay grain. All were accused of treason. "They will learn," Daenerys said almost to herself. "The world we're building needs to be cleansed of the old." Grey Worm nodded, a flick of his hand. The soldiers raised their blades, and just like that, another pool of blood joined the ashes. Up in a shadowed rooftop, Arya watched it all. Her face was plain, unnoticed, but her grip on the dagger at her side tightened. She wasn't going to wait much longer. By the time dawn crept over King's Landing, the city was restless. Not alive, just twitching like a corpse refusing to die. Smoke still lingered in alleyways. The scent of ash had replaced the smell of bread, and whispers floated like ghosts through the ruins. They called her the Fire Queen now. Not Daenerys, not Mysa, just the Fire Queen. Arya moved like a shadow between stone and soot. She wore the face of a pale-skinned maid now, someone forgettable. She'd learned long ago how not to be seen. What she hadn't learned, what she couldn't unlearn, was the weight that settled in her chest every time she got close to someone she had to kill. This time, it felt heavier than ever. She'd studied Daenerys for 3 days now. Her patterns, her guards, the rhythm of her walks. But something about the Queen had changed. She no longer smiled. She no longer spoke to her people. She stood above them, looking down like a god waiting to strike lightning. Arya waited. Jon, meanwhile, had reached the edge of his patience. He met Daenerys in the ruined throne room, or what was left of it. Rubble had replaced grandeur, no seat, no crown, just a place where power had once stood. She turned when he entered, eyes lit not with joy, but suspicion. "You're avoiding me," she said. "I'm watching," Jon replied, "listening." "To who?" she snapped. "The traitors?" "The people." She stepped toward him, each word laced with heat. "The people are scared because they've always been ruled by weakness." "I won't apologize for strength. You burned a castle, Daenerys, a house that had already bent the knee." "I sent a message." Jon's jaw clenched. "You sent a warning soaked in blood." Her gaze faltered just for a second, just enough for him to see the shadow of doubt flicker across her, but it was gone as fast as it came. "I've broken the wheel," she whispered, "but they still cling to the spokes. They want to rebuild it, to return to the old ways. I won't let them." Jon wanted to scream, but instead he just stared. "If you can't see it, then you're blind," she continued. "They'll turn on me the moment I show mercy, so I won't. I'll finish what I started." He left without answering, but something inside him had cracked. He could feel it, that line between love and horror. He wasn't sure which side he stood on anymore. Meanwhile, in the north, Sansa had gathered her wolves, 300 strong. Not an army, but not helpless either. Enough to make a statement, enough to fight back. They moved south quietly, avoiding the King's Road, using old paths known only to trappers and smugglers. In the Vale, Lord Royce's forces began to move too. He never sent an official declaration, but actions spoke louder than ravens. Ships left Gulltown. Riders galloped south. Even the Eyrie, long isolated and passive, had decided to choose a side. And in the Reach, Bronn played both sides like a drunk bard playing two lutes at once. He sold weapons to Dany's Unsullied while whispering promises to northern envoys. He didn't care who won. He cared who paid. But even Bronn could feel it. The realm was on the verge. Something massive was coming. Back in King's Landing, Arya made her move. She slipped past guards, slid through the half-broken corridors, and waited at the side of Daenerys' chambers. She knew the Queen would come here at dusk. She always did. It was the one place she allowed herself to rest. Arya pulled the dagger from her belt, the same one that had killed the Night King. Silent. Sure. She'd never failed before, but just as the door creaked open, footsteps echoed behind her. Jon Arya turned, blade in hand, and stared at her brother. Her eyes spoke everything she hadn't said. "I'm going to end this," she whispered. Jon didn't speak, but his face, tired, torn, tortured, said he had come to do the same. They stood there, two killers shaped by war, bound by blood and sorrow. And behind that door, the Queen they once believed in was breathing her last peaceful moments. The door creaked louder now, pushed open by a soft wind from the broken windows of the Red Keep. Dust danced in golden beams of dying sunlight, and inside, Daenerys stood at the edge of the balcony, staring out over her empire of ruin. Arya and Jon stood frozen for a moment, just a breath away from history. Jon's hand was on his sword. Arya's fingers wrapped around her dagger like a second heartbeat. Neither moved, neither spoke. Then she turned. Her eyes, once so full of fire and hope, met Jon's and softened for just a flicker of a second. "You." "And came," she said quietly. "I had to." Her gaze slid to Arya next. The dagger didn't surprise her. The look in Arya's eyes didn't either. "You too," she whispered. "I suppose I always knew." "No more burning," Arya said flatly. "No more killing." Daenerys let out a slow, heavy breath. "You think this is about power. You think I'm the villain, but I'm the one who stayed, the one who broke the wheel." "You broke it," Jon said, "and buried the whole kingdom in its pieces." Silence stretched. Wind rustled through the curtains. For a moment it was as if time itself paused. Then Daenerys spoke again, calm, quiet, and terrifying. "If you kill me," she said, "they'll tear each other apart. The lords, the ladies, all of them. You think they care about the people? They'll turn on each other like dogs the second I'm gone. You need me." "No," Arya said. "Westeros needs to heal, and it can't do that under your boot." Daenerys's hand moved subtly toward her belt, toward a hidden blade. Arya saw it first. She lunged. Jon moved too, but not to stop Arya. His sword clashed with Daenerys's blade mid-air. The sound rang out like a bell. Dany stepped back, breath ragged, fury in her eyes. "You'd betray me too?" she screamed at Jon. "After everything." "I never betrayed you," Jon said, his voice cracking. "You betrayed yourself." And then Arya moved again, not like a fighter, but like a ghost. One step, one breath. Her dagger sliced through the air. Daenerys gasped. It was over in an instant. She stumbled back, hand to her chest, eyes wide with shock and disbelief. She looked at Jon one last time, not with rage, but something else. Something that almost looked like sorrow. Then she fell. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even Drogon, curled atop the ruined courtyard below, seemed to sense it. A screech ripped through the air, wild and heartbroken. The city trembled. With the sound, somewhere people wept, somewhere others cheered. Jon sank to his knees beside her. Blood was already pooling beneath her. Arya stood still, eyes glassy, blade shaking slightly in her hand. She wanted to save the world, Jon whispered. Arya didn't answer. Outside, the city held its breath. Then Drogon came. The beast landed with a force that shook the stones. He nudged Daenerys's body once, twice, then he looked at Jon. Fire built behind his teeth, but it never came. Instead, Drogon spread his wings, let out one last deafening roar, and took to the sky with her in his claws. Her lifeless body dangled in the dragon's grip as he vanished beyond the clouds. Gone. No queen, no dragon, no throne, only Jon, Arya, and a silence that felt like judgment. That night, the capital didn't sleep. Tyrion was freed. Grey Worm vanished. The Unsullied broke into factions. Half of them boarded ships and sailed for Narth, as Daenerys once promised. The others marched north, unsure of who they were fighting for anymore. The North's forces arrived just as the news broke. There was no battle, no siege. Sansa stood at the gates of King's Landing and walked through them without a sword drawn. The war was over. But peace was still a long way off. The day after Daenerys' death, the Red Keep stood quieter than it had in decades. No banners flew from its towers, no courtiers bustled in its halls. The Iron Throne was gone, and now so was the Queen. All that remained were ashes, blood, and silence. Jon Snow stood before a council of nobles, his eyes hollow, his voice steady. It wasn't a trial, not yet. But it felt like one. Yara Greyjoy glared across the room, her voice sharp. She was our queen. You took that from her. She took everything from the realm, Sansa said before Jon could speak. Burning innocence, threatening peace. What my brother did, he ended the war. Is that what you call it? Yara snapped. An execution without a word of judgment? No trial, no voice for her cause? She had the sky, Arya said coolly, and fire. She used both. Gendry, sitting beside Ser Davos, spoke then. I saw what she did at Storm's End. I had to bury my people with my own hands. That wasn't justice. That was fear-wearing. A crown, Lord Royce nodded grimly. Even Bronn, lounging in his chair like he owned the place, muttered, she made her play. And she lost. The lords and ladies of Westeros had gathered not to mourn, but to decide what came next. And no one agreed. Some wanted a king, some a council. Others argued for independence. Dorne threatened to leave altogether. The Reach remained silent, still unsure where their loyalty now lay. The Vale wanted peace. The Riverlands just wanted food. It became clear that without the throne, they were a kingdom in name only. Westeros had shattered the moment the Iron Throne turned to molten steel, and Daenerys' death had only widened the cracks. Sansa stood slowly, her voice stronger than most expected. The North will remain free, she said. We will not. Kneel again. We've seen what Southern rule brings. There were no objections. No one had the strength to fight her anymore. Jon, meanwhile, refused every offer made to him. King, warden, leader. He had the face of a man who had already lost. More than he could bear. More than he could bear. I don't want a crown, he said. I never did. Tyrion, free now, leaned forward from the shadows of the council. Then perhaps you should have it. That's the kind of man the realm needs. Jon shook his head. The realm doesn't need me. It needs healing, and I can't be the face of it. So they compromised. Each kingdom would name its own ruler. A council would meet once a year to settle disputes, trade, peace. There would be no single monarch. No throne, just fragile threads holding an even more fragile land. They sent Jon to the Night's Watch, not because he was guilty, but because he was necessary elsewhere. The wall still stood. The wildlings still wandered, and beyond it something waited. Maybe not monsters, but ghosts, memories, silence. He left without protest. Arya sailed west, chasing lands that weren't on any map. She left without a goodbye, only a look, a silent nod. The end of one story and the beginning of another. Tyrion remained in King's Landing, helping rebuild, quietly drinking less than before. Sansa ruled the north, just, fair, unyielding, and Bronn somehow remained the richest man. Alive, still playing both sides of every coin. As for the people of King's Landing, they planted trees where the throne room once stood. No statues, no crowns. Just silence and dirt, as if to bury the memory of fire. Some said Westeros had been freed, others whispered it had simply been broken beyond repair. But one truth remained. The Iron Throne was gone. And what rose from its ashes was not a kingdom. It was survival. Time passed. Not much at first, but enough. The North, under Sansa's rule, became a land of quiet resilience. She governed not with warmth, but with clarity, never asking for loyalty, only for truth. The scars of the wars remained, but Winterfell stood tall again. Trade returned slowly. People stopped looking over their shoulders. Peace, fragile as glass, held. But peace didn't come without ghosts. Every night, Sansa would light a single candle in the Godswood. For Robb, for her mother, for Theon, and now for Jon. She never said his name aloud. She didn't have to. His shadow still lingered in the cold halls of her childhood home. Jon, far beyond the wall, rode with the free folk once more. Not as a commander, not even as a Stark, but as a man with nothing left to give. Tormund remained by his side, the only soul who understood that some men weren't meant to lead or kneel or speak much. They roamed the white wilderness together, hunting, surviving, living a quieter life. And in that silence, Jon began to feel something close to peace. Though it never stayed long. Some nights he dreamed of dragons, other nights of Arya's blade. But most often he dreamed of Daenerys, standing at the edge of that balcony, a queen with no throne, looking out over the broken world she had tried so desperately to fix. Arya's ship sailed west, and never returned. No raven, no whisper. Some say she found new lands, others say the sea took her, but those who knew her believed one thing: if she wanted to be found, she would be. Tyrion rebuilt the small council from scratch. Brienne took command of the city guard. Sam returned to Old Town and began writing the truth of what happened. He didn't call it a history, he called it a warning. When thrones burn, the fall of fire and steel. Bronn, of course, got his castle and more. Gold flowed into his pockets, and yet he never seemed content. Power had always been a game to him. But now that the game had ended, he was just another man with a big chair and no one to share it with. The council, this fragile ring of lords, met once a year, as agreed. Some years were civil, others not so much. Disputes over borders, trade wars, ambitions hidden behind smiles. The realm hadn't healed, it had simply stopped bleeding. For now. And what of the people? They didn't care for banners anymore. They didn't chant for queens or curse the names of kings. They just wanted food, safety, warmth. After so many years of war, fire and betrayal, they had no love left for rulers, only hope that their children wouldn't carry the weight of their scars. In the ruins of the Red Keep, wildflowers began to grow, slowly, stubbornly, nature reclaiming what war had stolen. No throne, no blood, just earth, quiet and tired. That was the real end, not a final battle, not a crown placed on a righteous head, just a kingdom learning how to live without a ruler, a people learning how to breathe without fear, a realm learning, maybe for the first time, that survival was more powerful than conquest. The wheel had been broken, but what lay in its place was not order or chaos. It was choice, and choice was more dangerous than any throne ever forged. The end.